And, well, actually, let's go right here. So 1932, they kill that silly bill that says we'll give you the surface and not the minerals and give you the skin of a squeezed lemon. And so a year and a half later, they passed the Taylor Grazing Act. Anybody know what the Taylor Grazing Act became? The BLM. That's where the BLM comes from, right? This is the organizing document for the BLM. Look at the very first line of the Taylor Grazing Act. In order to promote the highest use of the public lands, pending its final disposal. See how consistent this is all the way through until we get to 1976. Because rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. And by 1976, Congress says, we know that there was that solemn trust obligation in 1780. We know that you reaffirmed that in 1784 and 1787. We know the Constitution has the duty to dispose and not keep the land forever and ever and ever. And all the rest, all the way through enabling acts. They say, it's now our policy to just keep these lands in federal ownership. Does that make sense? That's how we got here. Does this make any sense? No, because it doesn't. I mean, just looking at that image makes no sense. Let me tell you a quick story. I flew in last night, right? I'm going to get my rental car, and I've got, oh, my phone is back up there. I have a phone case that has this on the back of it. And so I had my phone on the counter, and the young lady at the counter, she was so cute. She says, what is that? And I held it up to her, and I said, well, the red represents the land that the federal government controls. And she just kind of went, well, that's not right. You see how easy this is to educate? Right? Because that's our job. And right here on the back of the card, we'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but we'll probably need to go a little faster. These are just some. I mean, there's so much legal authority. This is just some. This is the Supreme Court. Enabling acts, that's the document that creates states. That's the legislative act that creates a state. Enabling acts are solemn compacts. What does that mean? I don't know. But it's solemn. We're in a church. That should mean something, right? It's solemn. They're solemn compacts. It's something more than a run-to-the-mill contract. Enabling acts are solemn compacts with enforceable rights and obligations on both sides. They said the federal government only holds territorial lands in trust for the states ultimately to be created. Supreme Court again. Once the United States shall have fully executed these trusts, the sovereignty of the new states will be complete, and they and the original states will be on an equal footing. The United States never held any municipal sovereignty, jurisdiction, or right of soil except for temporary purposes to execute the trusts. Now, I'll also tell you that, so this is what started us off in Utah. So in 2009, United States Supreme Court, we don't have time to go into the details, but there's videos about that on the website, YouTube channel, all the rest. But in 2009, the United States Supreme Court unanimously said, Congress doesn't have the authority to change the uniquely sovereign character of a state's admission, particularly where all of a state's public lands are at stake. What happened in 1976? They changed unilaterally the uniquely sovereign character of our enabling act of our admission. This is a 2009 unanimous Supreme Court case. That's what opened the door to start moving down. That's what started our investigation. That's what started us looking back to 1763 and asking the question, why is it like this? Because we're $2.5 billion below average in per pupil funding in Utah. 33% of our total state revenue, it's like 40% for Arizona, comes from a federal government that's broke. The single largest line item of your revenue in the state of Arizona comes from a federal government that is broke and already cutting back funds to the states and telling you every year in its financial statement that it's unsustainable. And you got no backup plan. This is where we are. It's not pretty, it's not fun, but this is where we are. That's what started us asking the question. We know the only way we're ever going to close that gap, the only way we're ever going to be self-reliant and govern ourselves and better care for our land is if we figure this out. Because this doesn't make sense. And that started the inquiry back from 1763 forward. And now you're caught up on the history, right? So on the website, right? On the website, you've got resources and key points and videos and all sorts of things. We'll talk about some of the other things that are in there. How many of you are on Facebook? Good. Bless your hearts. How many of you are on Twitter? Good. So like the Facebook page. I'm going to expect there were about 40 of you, 50 of you. I'm going to expect 50 likes, and then I'm going to expect 10 of your friends, so another 500 to like that Facebook page by tonight, okay? Is that fair? Okay? I'm also going to expect about another 500 people to follow us on Twitter. Because let me just put an image in your head right now. Benjamin Franklin, one of the greatest propagandists in our nation's history, in a good way, set type like this, right? One by one, set type to produce the pamphlets so that he could mass produce messages to get them out to people. You imagine what he would do with a Facebook page? You imagine what he would do with a YouTube channel? Those of you that are not on Facebook and are not on YouTube and are not on Twitter, I know you look at that and you look at your kids and grandkids going like this. If you're not on that, just when you say your prayers tonight, I want you to visualize Benjamin Franklin cursing you. And if you don't know how to do it, this young man back here that's doing the AV, what, Jason is it? Jason? Do you have people that can help these folks learn social media? Absolutely, right? I just met someone last night at Ron's place. There are people that can help you learn how to do this. Imagine you can sit in your pajamas and reach 1 million people. Let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in for a second. So any of you that are sitting there saying, I'm too old, or I don't know how to do it, or it's new, guess what? 150 trillion locked up. Let me take questions at the end, okay? There you go. Oh, right on. So we got, see now if you're up to speed, right, you're logging in and you're liking it and tweeting it. If you're tweeting while this is going on, use the hashtag transfer public lands. If you don't know what a hashtag is, that's your homework assignment. Okay? But I mean, seriously, think about what we've been given. And if we're consenting to what's happening now and we have these tools that they couldn't even dreamed about, shame on us. Shame on us. Right? It's time. It's time. I don't care whoever's the oldest one in the room, there's a lot of gas in the tank, and it is so easy, and there are all kinds of people that can help to make that happen. White papers on the Facebook, on the website. White papers, in fact, I'll show you right here. Brigham Young University just put out a law review article last month before last. 60 pages, copiously footnoted, on the federal government's compact-based duty to dispose of the public lands. Right? Think of what a tool that is. When you go out to meet with other people and they say, oh, it's clearly unconstitutional to do this. Excuse me. I got a law review article here that's 65 some odd pages, footnoted to the hilt. Why don't you read that and get back to me? Right? We have tools to do this. So now we get to the good part. At statehood, to create a state, Congress passes an act called an enabling act. And it says, if you do these certain things, the president will declare you a state. It's called an enabling act. That's how states are created. When we've asked this question, when we started passing our bill based on the things we've talked about, we had a law professor from the University of Utah and others that said, oh, well, to think that the western states could be treated equally like the eastern states, well, that's just clearly unconstitutional. Clearly unconstitutional. And of course, the newspapers printed that over and over and over again because he's a law professor. And so he would say, well, it's clearly unconstitutional, and so what did people believe? Oh, it's clearly unconstitutional. What question did they never ask? Why do you say that? Why do you say that? Why do you say that it's clearly unconstitutional that we should be treated the same as the eastern states? And so I had an opportunity to do a continuing legal education seminar. We're teaching about 120 lawyers with this law professor. And so I was excited to hear why. He went first, right? So he gets up, he puts up this map. Average annual precipitation in the lower 48 states. And he says, you see how it's different in the West than in the East? You see that? It's different? You with me? Therefore, the federal government keeps the land. Anybody have a constitution with them today? You got a constitution? Would you look up the arid clause in the Constitution for me? It's not in your Constitution? It must be in the law professor edition only.
Yeah, just his edition.
I swear that was his argument. Now you want to know, that was argument number one. You want to know what's really sad? Not one of the lawyers in the room even batted an eye, even raised an eyebrow. They went, oh, arid, check. Right? Do you consent to that? No. Then what are you going to do about it? Because where's the power? Right? Right? We have to educate. We have to get educated, educate others, hire and inspire. Get educated, educate, hire and inspire. That's what we've got to do. And think of the tools that we have. That was argument number one. Now think about that argument just on its face, okay? Oregon, Washington, Alaska, arid. Those are the 3 states with the most precipitation in the United States. And yet that's the argument they spit out with a straight face, because rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. And if we don't have the ability to say, excuse me, Mr. Law Professor, it doesn't make any sense, and there's no arid clause in the Constitution, and let me tell you the history about this. And let me give you a law review article to study and get back to me. Rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. That was argument number one, right? I actually had a retired judge also tell me, well, it's because your land is rugged. Rugged clause right next to the arid clause? No? Okay. So why the difference? That's the first reason that people give. In fact, I was on radio shows and panels the last couple of weeks. University professor from University of Utah, same thing. Because of the aridity, these lands are retained in the federal inventory. Doesn't that sound official? Your land is dry, the federal government keeps it, is what she's saying. They're still using this stuff over and over again, right? We've got to be able to say, that makes no sense, because our government, and we've got to get our leaders that we hire and inspire, because they protect our rights, to drill right through that. Because if we're buying this stuff, so that's argument number one. I'm going to tell you argument number 1A before we get to argument number 2. Argument number 1A, when I was running the bill, Transfer of Public Lands bill that we passed in Utah in 2012. I wish I was joking on this. Senior congressional staffer from Utah, well, living in Washington, comes back to Utah. Staffer, one of my congressmen. So, Representative Ivory, this is so exciting. Wouldn't it be great if we could get the land back? Imagine the possibilities if we get the land back, but it'll never happen. And I said, well, wow, I wish you'd have gotten to me sooner. I spent a lot of time working on this. Maybe you can help me understand why this will never happen. He says, well, because of polygamy at statehood. Utah, because of polygamy, the whole Mormon thing at statehood, we gave up our land. Yeah. I said, really, where do you get that? Oh, it's in the Enabling Act. Is it now? I'm going to show you the language, and we're going to go through this. It says forever disclaim all right and title. I said, yeah, I'm familiar with that language. You're telling me that's because of polygamy? Yep. What about Arizona? What about Montana and Nevada? What about Louisiana that has that same language in their Enabling Act? He says, really? I said, yeah. Oh, we'll talk later. Yeah, we should probably talk later. But see, people are laboring that somehow that's okay, and they've made up these stories as to why it's okay. Folks, that's not okay. That violates the very foundational principles of our nation. That is not okay. And if we consent to that, shame on us. Have I cursed you enough with that? All right, so why the difference? That was 1 and 1A. Now let's go to reason number 2. It gets way better with reason number 2. Reason number 2, we talked about it a little bit. Reason number 2 is you just didn't want the land. In 1912, folks in Arizona, they didn't care about property. They didn't care about self-governance. They wanted the federal government to control that much of their state. Didn't want the land. Because in your Enabling Act, it says these 6 words. You can find these 6 words in your Enabling Act. Forever disclaim all right and title. Gave up the land. And the law professor sat down as if to say, I rest my case. Then it was my turn. I didn't even deal with arid because I only had 10 minutes. I said, well, let's deal with this forever disclaim all right and title, Professor. Wow, that's a pretty tough one. Look at that. Forever, the people inhabiting the territory do agree and declare that they forever disclaim all right and title to the unappropriated lands. Wow, how do you ever overcome that? Western states like Arizona and others, we gave up our land for the privilege of becoming a state. We never can ever have our land. But you see, that's Alabama's Enabling Act. And then you see here, forever disclaim, all right and title, and that's Louisiana's Enabling Act. And then you see right here, forever disclaim, all right and title, and that's Nebraska's Enabling Act. Incidentally, on the website, I may have it up here. Incidentally, on the website, you can see Nevada and Nebraska's Enabling Act side by side. They were done at the same time, 3 weeks apart in 1864. Nevada's actually a state first, and then Nebraska's a state 3 years later. Nebraska goes from more than 30% public land down to 1%, while Nevada goes from 86 to 81, same terms. I got on there Utah and North Dakota side by side. Enabling Acts 5 years apart. North Dakota goes from more than 50% public land down to 3%. Utah goes from 86 to 67. Same time. Why the difference? Nobody can answer that question because we haven't been asking it.